Protect your DNA. BioPQQ can promote formation of new mitochondria. Infowarsstore.com.
Welcome back to our live coverage of the New York primary, GOP and Democrat. I'm David Knight, and joining me now is Jakari Jackson. Jakari, I'm looking at the Drudge headlines, and we see that voters are disappearing on the Democrat side and ballots are disappearing on the Republican side. Works the same way. It works the same way. They just have different approaches. See, on the Republican side, they disappear the ballots and the elections, and on the Democrat side, they disappear the voters.
So, just completely got rid of them.
They've got their own way of doing things because, you know, the political parties are just so different from each other, aren't they?
Yeah, and this is always what we talk about. I have this article here. This is from The Observer, and they're talking about how the comptroller will perform an audit in New York City, and they say in 100,000 voters have pretty much disappeared from the rolls in Brooklyn. Yeah. 100,000.
No problem.
You know, it's like it never existed.
We're going to be joining our reporter Richard Reeves, who's in New York in front of the Trump Towers, in just a few moments. We're also going to be following the election as it unfolds, and right now, Drudge is the only one that's reporting any results based on exit polls because major networks won't report results officially until all the polls are closed, and they are just now closing in New York. Now, the early results that Drudge has been reporting are Trump 61%, Kasich 24%, and Cruz 15%, a distant third, 1/4 of what Trump got in New York. Now, what Trump needed to do was to get significantly over 50%. That's what everybody was looking for. He needs to get a large number of these delegates, again, chasing that magic number of 1237, because Cruz is going around the back door taking delegates that Donald Trump has already won. And let's understand, this is not a politics effort, okay? This is taking somebody. They've been elected delegates for one reason and one reason only, and that is to vote for Trump or to vote for Cruz. So when you go in and take these guys, that's as if you voted for a Republican and you get a Democrat, okay? It's one issue that they're going to do this for. So they're hoping they can throw this into a contested election going into the second ballot, and then he's already got his people in place rejecting the wishes of the voters. Now, on the Democrat side, we've got Clinton at 54, Sanders at 46. Again, Hillary Clinton needed to show that she was moving ahead in this race, get her momentum back. Bernie Sanders has won 8 of the last 9 elections. And on the Democrat side, they really are elections. They're not these kind of selections that they've been running, these voterless elections that Cruz has been winning. And Sanders is not really trailing Clinton by that much when you remove the superdelegates. But when you put in the superdelegates, she's got a huge lead. And as we've seen before, and as we've covered before on Infowars, they've talked to the superdelegates in New York, and they've asked them would they switch if the voters chose Bernie Sanders, and many of them, all the people that would respond to them basically said, no, we wouldn't. I'm going to vote for Hillary. She's my friend.
And the thing about that is we have another article. This is from Fox News, and they're talking about the thing that you're talking about right here, these super delegates. And they're saying that when Democrats caucused in Washington state last month, Bernie Sanders scored an overwhelming victory, 73%. But that wide margin did nothing to sway the state's super delegates who were already committed to Hillary Clinton.
That's right. That's right. We've seen over and over again that he would get about the same number of delegates as Hillary Clinton out of the voters, or just 1 or 2 more. But then when they would throw in the superdelegates, she would win an overwhelming majority of what's going on. Now, he's tried to downplay this. Right now he's down by 8% according to early exit polls. When asked about this, of course, you know, saying that it looked like he was behind about 8 to 10 points in the polls, he says, what does it mean if I lose? He says, well, it means I lose. That's all it means. So it's no big deal, he says. However, I want to talk to you about what it would mean if Bernie Sanders were to win, if he were to win the general election and become president. Let's take a quick look at what would happen to your paycheck. Now, this is a story from the Daily Caller. And then they look at it and say, well, what would it mean for my paycheck? You know what? You're going to lose if Bernie wins the presidency. They had a study that was done by the Tax Foundation. They say it's a nonpartisan Washington, D.C. based think tank. They looked at every income bracket, including the lowest bracket, and everybody across every bracket would lose at least 7% of their take-home pay. But there's other issues involved here as well. But let's look at some of these different brackets. They say if you look at the very poorest people, the bottom 10%. You know, Bernie Sanders and the Democrat Party, they're there for those people on the bottom. They're there for those low-earning, wage-earning people. They said those who are making $18,870 a year, and of course now what they're doing here is a single filer, no children, using standard deduction. So look at this income level, $18,000. They would see a $45 drop every other page period, okay? 7.3% reduction. That's a reduction in their take-home pay. An individual in the lower middle income range, that would be about $23,400, would take home 7.6% less money. Okay, their check would fall from about $751 to $694. You didn't need that money, really, you know?
Well, David, I think you're completely missing the point here because you're going to get free college.
Yeah, right.
That makes it all worthwhile.
You're going to get free college. He's got some other freebies for you, too, but there's also some ancillary effects of that besides just your take-home pay. Let's look at a couple more of these. Middle income earner, $36,200 a year, in the 50th percentile, okay? They would see an 8% reduction. Their paycheck would go from $11.31 every 2 weeks to $10.40. Now, let's take a look at some of the highest earning wage earners, okay? $92,000. They're going to see an 8% drop, 8.3%, or $218 taken out of every biweekly paycheck. But those in the highest income tax bracket, the very highest, they're going to get slammed. Doesn't it make you feel better? They're going to get slammed with a 17.9% decrease in their take-home pay. Okay, now, do you really think that's going to happen, Jagari?
No.
And would it make you feel better?
No, it doesn't make me. That's the whole point. When you say it doesn't make you feel better, it doesn't make me feel better that somebody is being screwed worse than I am. Because it makes me think like it may be one day if I do climb that mountain, David, then the same thing is just going to happen to me.
But see, that's the whole point of socialism. You're supposed to feel better, even though they take an extra 8% out of your paycheck. You're supposed to feel better that the really rich guys are going to take home 18% less. So that makes you feel better, doesn't it?
Well, they have the tax havens. They have the lawyers to jump through all the loopholes. And that's the thing people don't get. When I talk to people on the street, they don't understand that these guys have lawyers dedicated to finding they're gymnastic.
You're ahead of me. That was my next point. It's like, guess what? They're not going to pay the 18%. Yes. This is a hypothetical situation.
Very much.
Meaning that the people at the top don't do any tax planning. And they're the ones who plan it the most. They're the ones who get their congressmen to write special exemptions for their business or whatever. Okay? They're not going to pay that extra increase. So all of you at the bottom, the middle, and the high middle, you're going to be the ones paying 8% more on the income tax. But they say, don't worry. You're going to save some money because we're going to take away the health insurance costs and we're going to give you those free college benefits, okay? But now that's going to add some benefits here, but understand what would happen. They say the GDP would drop an estimated 9.5% because everybody's going to be taking home a lot less, anywhere from $50 a paycheck to a couple $100 a paycheck less. So the GDP is going to drop, they estimate 9.5%. Capital investment would plummet by 18%. Wages would be reduced roughly 4.3%. Now, that's not talking about the wages that you take home, your net pay. That's going down by 8%. No, your gross salary would drop. Why? Because the businesses are making less money, because the economy is contracting, because you're sucking all this money into Washington. And they want to talk about campaign finance reform. The problem with Washington is the money that's there. It's the black hole that pulls in all that money and power. And as long as you've got that, no matter what rules you put in, no matter how you finance campaigns at the federal level, you're still going to have corruption. You're still going to have crony capitalism, and you're going to have crony socialism as well. And so they say it would also result in about 6 million full-time jobs that would be lost. So you know what? If Bernie loses, as he says in New York, he loses. If I lose, I lose, okay? But if he wins, you lose.
That's exactly right. It is just the other day, David, I saw a fight for 15 protests. You know, these McDonald's workers or whatever want $15 now. And hey, if you guys can swing it, best of luck to you. But we also saw the article just a couple of days ago. I think it was on Drudge, how they're starting to replace the McDonald's workers with the machines. Yeah. So you already have the pop machine. Now it's going to be like pretty much a kiosk, you know, like this pad I hear you have here. You go in and hit, you want a Big Mac or whatever, and it pops out. So you know, you're pricing yourself out of a job. And
that's the way it has always worked, because they've never realized any real gain from increasing the minimum wage. If they weren't, let's just raise it to $1,500 an hour. Let's make everybody rich. You can't do that because it's going to percolate through the system. People are going to make adjustments in the prices of their goods, or they're going to lay people off, or they're going to have to adjust to the reality of the real world. So you can't, by fiat, make yourself wealthy. And that's what the workers at the bottom don't understand. But you're right, Shikari. Now there's a new dynamic coming in, and that is they're going to be able to just completely replace you, not with a foreign worker that they bring in at a lower price wage, but with a robotic worker that they don't basically pay anything to.
It's just going to be the mechanic. It's like the guy who goes to the Redbox machines. He goes in there, he switches out the DVDs, and that's pretty much going to be the person who works at McDonald's now.
That's right. That's right. Now, we've also got a story that's up on the Drudge Report.
The AP, by the way, just called it for Trump.
There you go. We didn't.
So
we knew that was going to happen pretty quickly. They were going to call it for Trump. Now, here's the deal, and we're not going to be able to give you an answer on this tonight, and that is how many delegates does he get?
Yes.
Well, if he's got a really, really large 61% majority, there's a good chance he's going to get most of those delegates, at least for the first round, until Ted Cruz comes in and steals
them.
And that's what we're going to talk about in just a moment here.
And it says, just real quickly, I have this article from CBS News. They're saying that New York has a total of 95 delegates for the GOP. So how many of these he'll actually walk away with is just a matter of time to see.
Well, he gets 14 delegates if he wins the state by more than 50%. So he's got his block of 14 delegates there. But then they're going to go in congressional district by congressional district. And that's why we're not going to know tonight what the delegate math looks like on either the Republican or Democrat side, because they collect these totals on a county-by-county basis. But, of course, we all know they gerrymander the congressional districts, and they run over many different counties. So it takes them a while for them to figure out how this. Another place where they can probably finagle the vote is when they round this off by congressional district. But let's take a look at what Ted Cruz is saying, because he had a back-and-forth exchange with Sean Hannity. This is up at the top of the Drudge Report. Cruz slams Trump and says the Trump campaign seems to be incapable of, quote, running a lemonade stand. He says all this noise and complaining and whining about the elections has come from the Trump campaign because they don't like the fact that they've lost 5 elections in a row. Were they elections? I forgot.
No, I didn't know anything about any elections, David.
He says Trump's campaign doesn't know how to organize on the grassroots level. So when the delegates are elected, the real conservative activists show up, the people who support him, the party operatives, you're joining us, as Reince Priebus says. They're trying to join our little tiny party here, and we don't want to make sure that that little tiny party doesn't get any bigger. We don't want any people who've never voted before. We don't want independents. We don't want Democrats to come in, and we don't want the real grassroots out there. No, we want the old line party hacks who are here, okay, the people who are running the local party, the state party.
Who do what we tell them.
Exactly, exactly. These are the people who are the party apparatchiks. It's not the grassroots level. But Ted Cruz does know a great deal about how to reach out to the grassroots level, because one of the things that he's done, which really should creep you out, is the way he's data mined everybody's preferences, and he customizes as they go door to door to talk to voters. In the few places where they've had real, genuine, authentic elections, they go door to door, talk to voters, and the person who's going door to door has a program that tells him exactly what your issues are, so that he can customize his campaign lies to the individual voter. I mean, we all know, and especially Ted Cruz is Exhibit A of somebody who will say anything to get a vote anywhere. He goes to Denver, and he tells the voters out there, hey, I'm all for federalism. I want to let you guys continue to have pot. When 2 years ago, he was saying that it was an abuse of executive power that Obama wasn't shutting that down. Now he's all for it. And it's like, wait a minute. I thought you were Mr. Constitution. You just discovered the 9th and 10th Amendment? I mean, 2 years ago, if Barack Obama stood by the 9th and 10th Amendment, then that was an executive abuse of power. But today, he's all for that.
Well, it's always these guys, they're constitutional lawyers or constitutional scholars, and then just one day they happen to discover, like you said, that there's actually a constitution there that they need to read.
That's right. Let's look at some of these people who feel like they were disenfranchised. Of course, our reporters went to Colorado, went to many places, New York, Colorado, Portland as well. We've got a clip here of Colorado delegates speaking out about how this election, quote unquote, really was run. Let's run that clip.
This lady approached me. She said she was a delegate at the convention. Did you actually go to the convention?
Yes, I did. I attended the 5th Congressional.
You are a delegate for...
Yes, I was selected from my precinct and then selected from my district.
So you said you were a state delegate?
I went to state. I was one of the top delegates, not only out of the precinct, but out of the county as well.
America is about your vote, not about people selecting a vote for you. And we're ticked off. And I've never protested before, but I'm mad as hell.
And the mainstream media is making it seem like you guys are calling sour grapes. Y'all didn't understand the process. Did you understand the process?
Yeah, I fully understood the process, and we were disenfranchised.
So we showed up first night of caucusing. They said, you know, sit down. It's a little bit different this year.
When we went to the caucus, been going for 20 years, we always had a straw poll. This year we didn't. And we didn't find out until the night of the straw poll.
It looked like there was a lot of weird stuff going on. I know that at the assembly it looked like there was a lot of cruise operatives there.
The convention turned out to be a joke.
Our precinct captain lied about the results of our makeshift straw poll that we did do that night because we all demanded having one.
The fact that we only had, and I wrote it here on this sign, we only had 10 seconds to speak. So 60% of the people there were unbound delegates. That would lead me to assume that 60% of the people there were like, well, we don't know who we're going to vote for. Let's listen to all of these delegates and see who we like, who can speak our voice for us. We only had 10 seconds, man.
The thing that's most disturbing is March 1st, tens of thousands of Trump supporters went to the caucuses where they learned for the first time, this is something that the average voter doesn't know, they learned for the first time that they couldn't take a vote, and if they did take a vote, it wouldn't count.
But from what I saw, with how low the attendance was at the precincts, it's not an actual representation of Colorado's voters' actual vote. That's basically just my opinion from what I saw. I saw an old-timer there, and he actually said to me when I asked him, why wasn't there more advertising to get the word out about the caucus? He said, well, the GOP likes it that way because then the people that shouldn't be coming to vote won't come.
Someone made the decision. I received an email saying I'm no longer a delegate, but I received an email that I could be considered as an alternate. This is completely wrong. Before the previous election with Mitt Romney, I was a delegate, and apparently my vote was counted then, but in this election, it isn't. I am for Mitt Romney and I am for Donald Trump, but I mean, the individual vote should be counted, and we should go to a primary where we just cut all this nonsense out. You can debate whether it's an open primary or a closed primary, but let's just the vote of the individual should be counted, not someone who's sitting behind a closed desk.
We didn't know that there wasn't going to be a straw poll. Both my wife and my son and I showed up, and normally we always do a straw poll. We've been doing straw polls every year, and the delegates were been bound. Well, that night we found out that they had unbound them and they weren't going to do a straw poll, so it was a surprise to us.
Actually, in my precinct, even though there weren't many people that attended or knew to attend, which seems like the GOP didn't advertise it on purpose, but the majority were Trump people, actually. But we ended up sending, I think, 2 others as crews, and me being the only Trump, because we just didn't really, I guess we didn't understand the process, and we picked the candidates before knowing who they were voting for, because the guy the old-timer who was explaining it didn't explain how to do the precinct for our individual precinct very well.
Well, when you work behind the scenes and you spend months setting it up so that the person, that majority of the ordinary new voters like Julio and others we've heard from don't get a chance to speak, those people are resentful and they're angry. And
it could break up the party.
I think the party's finished. As a libertarian, I wish my party, the Libertarian Party, was stronger. Right. I wish that its message was clear, but this message ought to be clear. We need a third party. Right. We need a new party in America that gives the people a chance, and it starts with a primary. Hell with the caucus system. We need a primary.
It needs to be changed. Yeah. We need reform. We need comprehensive election reform.
Okay, now those were people in Colorado that our reporters talked to. Clearly, they do not agree with Ted Cruz that this is just standard operating procedure. That the problem is that Donald Trump doesn't know how to organize at the grassroots level. These are people who say, hey, I've been coming to these things for decades. I've never seen anything like this. Or the lady who said, hey, the GOP guy that I talked to said, well, we don't want the wrong people coming to these things. You know?
Yeah, the people that shouldn't be here.
It's like this little country club thing. They're going to find out. They're going to have a very, very tiny tent to hold their party in. We're going to go to our reporter, Richard Reeves, in New York in just one moment. Give us a quick update on the vote totals, Jakari.
Yes, I have a few different sites here, David. Starting on the Huffington Post, we see 68% for Trump, Kasich is actually leading over Cruz, and of course, Mrs. Clinton is leading with 61%. Similar numbers on CNN and also on AP Google News. They have Trump winning with 71.8%.
And we're looking at only about 3% in. So it's jumped up from 60% to 70%. We don't know if it'll stay there that long. And on the Democrat side, it's about 7% of the vote in, and it's about 60-40, 61.6 to 38.4. So it's a big win for Clinton and Trump at the very least. And interestingly enough, they haven't called it for Clinton, even though she was 7%. I'm sorry. Is that, yeah, that's 8% of the vote in now. She's at 62 and Sanders is at 38. They haven't called it for Clinton, even though they've got more in. So
yes.
I guess they're confident that Trump's numbers are going to stay up, maybe not so confident that that lead is going to hold for Hillary Clinton. Let's go to our reporter, Richard Reeves, who's in New York right now in front of the Trump Towers. Richard.
Yes, sir, David. Hi, David. Thank you very much. Y'all doing a great job there in Austin. And as you can see, I've got the Trump Tower right behind me. We're waiting for that press conference from Donald Trump about tonight's victory. And I tell you what, is if everybody's not suffering enough election fatigue yet, if everybody hasn't rolled their eyes in their back of their head enough, probably an even bigger event that we're going to be talking about tomorrow and in upcoming shows. A bigger thing going on right now than even the New York primary tonight is the GOP RNC committee meeting going on in Hollywood, Florida this week, where they're going to be talking about what rule book to use.
Oh.
They're either going to use the rule book from the House of Representatives, the U.S. House, or they're going to use Robert's Rules of Orders. So you can just imagine the attorneys and legalese and rat's nest that's all going to be. And they're going to be talking about also that Rule 40B, which, by the way, it looks like they've even discovered a loophole. You know, they're supposed to have their Rule 40B where it talks about that you have to have the majority of 8 states to even get on the nominations ballot.
Yeah, that was the one they put in so they wouldn't allow Ron Paul to even speak, let alone be put in a nomination. They didn't want him to talk. They didn't want him nominated. So they created a new rule just to keep Ron Paul from speaking. And now that rule is coming back to haunt them because everybody knows about that rule. And now they've got to waive that rule to get anybody but Donald Trump in because nobody qualifies other than Donald Trump.
Well, guess what, David? It looks like these legal eagles, here's the thing.
Oh, yeah.
We are the college senior varsity team, whatever, when it comes to politics. And we're up against the New York football Giants, the Super Bowl version of the Giants, because they're already talking about that even if they don't get that rule changed, that they've figured out a loophole in it, which would be to just prior to the nominations being done, is just get 8 states, which, by the way, the territories count as a state, and those territories are highly controlled by the GOP establishment.
That's right.
So they can get territories, Puerto Rico, things like that, the Virgin Islands, you name it. They can get those territories to be part of those 8 states. What they'll do is have a poll, an informal poll, a head count, and get it in writing that we've got majorities from these 8 states and or territories, which, like I say, they count as states. So maybe Obama was right when he was talking about 57 states, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. He knew something we didn't know. And all this time we said Obama was going to suspend the election, but it's going to be the GOP establishment that suspends the election.
Well, like I say, it looks like there's potentially a big fat loophole already in Rule 40B.
Yeah.
Even before the RNC has meetings prior to the convention. It looks like, from what I've read today, which I've been studying it heavily today, because this is such a big deal, all this stuff going down in Hollywood, Florida, is basically, it looks like what they will do is potentially go to however many states they think they've got majorities in, that being the GOP establishment, that being the Paul Rhino faction, the old John Boehner faction, et cetera, the Mitt Romney faction, and they'll just gather up in writing. This is not a formal vote for nominations, but they'll just get it in writing. Oh, we've got majorities from these 8 states. As long as they submitted 1 hour in writing before the nominations are formally submitted, then guess what? That meets the requirement. So even if those delegates are obligated on the first ballot to go with Cruz or Trump or Kasich or Rubio, potentially, depending on the states, the breakdown and all that, potentially that's how they're going to circumvent Rule 40B even before the Rules Committee in Cleveland even meets. So how about that?
Well, we've heard the GOP establishment say, yeah, Donald Trump, all he's got is a bunch of votes. Yeah, he's only got a couple of more million votes than everybody else at this point in time, and they're not finished with the process yet. I would change your analogy. I would say, look, it's not that we're the college team and they're the professional football team. I don't believe it's that way. I think that what we've got here with the mass of people, we need to understand we have the power. We're the professional team. They're the junior high school football team out here who has the refs. They've got the league doesn't want the professional football team to win, so they're going to rig it for the junior high school guys, okay? And they're going to change the rules. They control the refs, and they're going to move the goalposts if they have to. That's what they're going to wind up doing. So, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. They're rigging this game as crooked as it can be. And the most important thing coming out of this is for people to see how crooked this is. And that's one of the things I'm glad to see in this election. We saw a lot of crookedness, didn't we, in the last election with Ron Paul. And yet Ron Paul didn't call him on it like Donald Trump is doing. And I really appreciate the fact that Donald Trump is not letting them get away with this fraud.
Well, your analogy is valid, David. You know, the thing that the two analogies have in common, yours and mine, is either way, we lose. Right?
That's right.
So that's a big problem. So, you know, you can look at it how you want to. The bottom line is they've got their thumb on the scale.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. Their thumb's on the scale. Oh, you know, they won't talk about rig. But it's just like, you know, so many patriots go into court pro se. And, you know, the thing of it is, man, you go in there
it's
and
a
they'll
rigged
beat you on
court system.
they'll beat you on procedure because you didn't dot an I, you didn't cross a T.
That's right.
You know,
or they'll just say, "Shut up, you're not going to speak." I mean, we just had a piece of news that we covered last week where you had a guy who was representing himself, and he was trying to speak, and the judge said, "Shut up! I don't want you to enter that into evidence." And he kept talking, and the judge told the sheriff who was there, he had a bracelet on him, an electric bracelet, and had the sheriff shock him into submission right there on the floor, torturing him because basically put him on the floor there with an electric bracelet.
Well, even what we saw with that report from Rob Dew just a second ago, where he was talking to the delegates, the guy said, "I had 10 seconds to talk."
Yeah. Exactly.
Completely ridiculous.
Right.
Exactly. It's a
and
rigged
that's what
system.
they did in Colorado. So just keep in mind what we saw in Colorado. That could end up being child's play compared to what we're going to be seeing in Cleveland.
Well, people need to understand.
That's why we got to be ready.
Yeah, and people understand the fraud, and we're going to make sure they see the fraud. We're going to cover that fraud as we go to the convention, and we are going to have people get in their face about it, say we're fed up, we're mad as H, and we're not taking it any longer. And that's the first thing that you have to do to start to take this government, this country back. We're not going to fix everything with one election. We're not going to fix everything with one guy at the top. We're going to fix it when people realize they've been disenfranchised, they've been cheated and robbed by people like we see here at the upper echelon of the GOP and like we see on the Democrat side as well with the superdelegates. Although superdelegates really aren't the factor at this point because Bernie Sanders is losing the popular vote as we see in New York as well.
Right. So finally, that Democrat race might finally get put to rest because it's been decided long ago, as we know. It's just been a dog and pony show, I think, to distract from more people focusing on the GOP race. So hopefully that'll bring more people to the big civics class that we've got going on here in the GOP race.
That's right.
And I'm telling you what, here's what I'm kind of my boil down on Cleveland. We're going to have lots to talk about, but here's my boil down. I think 70% of that delegation in Cleveland are going to be anti-establishment folks. They're going to be divided among, between Cruz and Trump. It's going to be 40% Trump, 30% Cruz, but then you're going to have that 30% establishment faction. So deals have to be cut. Trump's got to connect with some establishment or some of Cruz. Cruz got to connect with some Trump, some establishment. The establishment's going to have that 30% minority. Now, what they've got, like you said, they've got the referees.
That's right.
So that gives them an edge. But you know what? When they hold their hands up and get a roll count, 30% is not going to add up to 1237.
Mm-hmm.
No way, no how. So basically, and then to add to this 3D level chess game that we've got going on is actually Rule 40B probably benefits Ted Cruz more than it benefits Donald Trump. Because let's say if Donald Trump sees that if he's got the 1237, then boom, he tries to get on the first vote. Hopefully he wins. But if he has to go beyond that, or maybe he sees he's already short before the vote ever occurs, well, Rule 40B, if that's done away with, which, like I said, I think there's a big fat loophole in there anyway, it actually would hurt Ted Cruz because that establishment coalition that they've been building right now, well, guess what? That's going to evaporate. Ted Cruz will lose that establishment. So it actually potentially hurts Ted Cruz the most on the 40B. So it's an I tell you what, this is 1776 level stuff without the blood, the bullets, and the bayonets, man.
Well, and I hope it doesn't come to that. But, you know, it was John Kennedy who said, if you make peaceful change impossible, you make violent change inevitable. And to paraphrase him, I don't have the exact quote, but that's what we don't want to see happen. We hope that these people who are in power will pull back and try to fight at some other level. But I think it's very instructive for people to see this. And as we move forward, it's going to get very interesting there in the rest of the Northeast. As Paul Manafort had said, by April 26, he believed that Ted Cruz would be dead in the water because we're looking at him getting about 12, 13% of the vote right now in New York. He's not going to do much better with these states that are coming up next week that are all in the Northeast. He's not a national candidate. He told everybody he was going to do well in the South. He couldn't even do well in the South. He couldn't win the evangelicals in the South. The only places that Ted Cruz has done well is in the Midwest and these caucuses in the Midwest where he can play these Machiavellian lawyer games, and that's the kind of nonsense that they're going to be doing as they come into the convention. But this is where Kasich thinks he's going to win it. He needs 150% of the remaining delegates to win, but he's not looking at that. He's just hoping it's going to go into a brokered convention where he can play these kind of backroom deals with people.
Yeah, he's already playing that game. Basically, to me, when I saw this go into at the very least, a contested convention, was back after Super Tuesday where Texas was involved on March 1st. We heard right there, I think it was the Thursday, right? We had a debate in Houston, Texas, that following Thursday after that first Tuesday. I believe that's when it was, or it might have been the following Thursday. But anyway, when they had a meeting, when Jeb Bush met with Cruz and Rubio and Kasich and all that, that is the moment when this contested / brokered convention began. And we are heavily into it. And you're right, Ted Cruz is most likely after tonight going to be mathematically eliminated from the potential of getting the 1237 prior to the convention. But, you know, as everybody knows now, it's all about, hey, he's going to work on getting that 1237 somehow magically delicious via the backroom delegate process. So it's going to be interesting to see. It's going to be one heck of a civics class. Hopefully too many of us don't pass out from it.
Well, the top of the Drudge Report says that when they did exit polling, I think it was exit polling, they asked, it was an exit poll. More than 70% of the people say that the candidate who has the most votes, in other words, a plurality, not the magic majority of 50% plus one vote, but the person who has the vast plurality should be the nominee. So that clearly is where the public sentiment lies, and you don't want to just throw out millions of votes unless you want to completely burn down the party. And I think that the Republicans are willing to burn down the party because the thing that is important to them this time around, 4 years ago, it was Obamacare. They were going to get Obamacare with either Barack Obama or with Mitt Romney, because Mitt Romney had already done that in Massachusetts with Ted Cruz. He had done Romney Care, exactly the same thing as Obamacare. This time around, they want these trade treaties and they want the open borders. And they are willing to burn down the party so that they can get Hillary Clinton in and they can get their three legs of their globalist government moving forward. And the Republicans are quite willing to burn the party down in order to get ahead on those three issues. I think that's really what's coming up. We're going to thank you, Richard. Thanks, and we're going to. Are you going to be staying in the Northeast to report on more elections up there coming up this next week, or?
Well, I'm scheduled to fly back down to Texas tomorrow. I've been up here. Tomorrow will be a full week. So, wow. But shortly after that, I'll be hitting the trail once again with more reports. So, and I'll be standing by for more tonight here after we hear Donald Trump. Looks like actually. I'm sitting here watching. It looks like he's approaching the stage right now. I'm actually streaming it on another phone, and it looks like he's about to talk. So,
yeah, they called the vote for. They called a win for Donald Trump very early on, but even though they've got about 24% of the vote on the Democrat side, they have still not called it for Hillary Clinton, even though she's winning 61-39. They still haven't called it for her, so that's kind of interesting. Thank you so much, Richard Reeves.
Like I said, like I said, they've liked making a horse race out of the Democrat race, even though it's not even a horse race. Thank you, guys,
right.
and we'll talk to y'all in a little bit.
All right,
Okay, thank you, Richard. Yeah, we've got a horse race for sure. We got Trojan horses, we got dark horses, we got stalking horses, we got every kind of horse you can imagine. They got the horse right here. His name is Paul Revere, right? And Trump is going live. We're going to talk a little bit, and I want to, the missing 28 pages has been in the news a lot. We really haven't talked that much. I talked a little bit about it in the fourth hour about where these different candidates are on the missing 28 pages. I've got a couple of things I want to read to you about that, but before we do, we're going to play this clip of remember we had the video in Portland where we had the gender transvestite, maybe not a transgender, maybe just a transvestite, who spit on a guy who was a pro-Trump person, basically pulled down the mask, spit on him, and said, "Oh, and you can't hit me because I'm a woman." It's a guy. And my son who was there said, the other guy should have said, "Well, for right now, I'm a woman."
Yeah, I self-identify as somebody who can defend themselves.
Okay, but here's this report. This is the person who was spit upon, and this is what he has to say. Let's go ahead and run that report.
Hey guys, my name's Robert. I'm the guy that got spit on by the communist tranny April 16th at the Portland Donald Trump event.
Come back with some quotes, okay? You don't know. Hey, this dude just. Hey, this dude just.
I'm a tranny.
To me, the event was first and foremost about freedom of speech. Donald Trump second. It was really about standing up to the hypocritical, oppressive, extreme left that we've been dealing with that wants to dismantle our freedoms. They want to take away our freedom of speech, our right to assembly, our religious liberties, our right to bear arms. All of it makes them uncomfortable for some weird reason. I was there for freedom. And these people were really just there to disrupt.
You're bad insane. Good job.
You don't do fucking real news, dude. You do fucking
They didn't come with substantive arguments, ideas of their own, substantive critiques. I mean, nothing. They came with noise, nonsense, intimidation, hate. That's all they had.
You got a communist pig flag. That's right, commies are pigs. They want to take everything you work for and put it away. You know, you're working for billionaires. You realize that? You're working for billionaires.
I mean, these people are mentally unstable. They really don't perceive any wrong that they do. They think that they are 100% in the right. It's very sad. A lot of people are asking why I didn't fight back. And to me, it's not worth it. I appreciate having gun rights. And I'm not going to let some little twerp with identity confusion and a bad temper take away my gun rights.
You haven't done your research and you're just going along with what everyone else is saying. So go do some research. Come back with some quotes, okay? You don't know. Hey, this dude just. Hey, this dude just.
I'm a tranny. No, go ahead.
Hey,
touch a woman.
This tranny
touch
just
a woman.
spit on my face.
Touch a woman.
He just spit on my face.
So what, you just pushed the woman or what?
We are not going to be intimidated by communist organizers. We will not have our freedom of speech shut down. We stand for democracy. We stand for the rights of every citizen in America, but we stand for citizens, the rights of citizens, the interests of citizens. We will not be intimidated by these people.
Clean, pure drinking water. You can't survive without it. But where do you get it? Alexa Pure Pro is a brand new, groundbreaking, gravity-fed water filtration system that is like no other. The Alexa Pure Pro transforms water from virtually any fresh source into clean, healthy drinking water, pairing the unprecedented superfiltration power of an all-new gravity block core with a hybrid chromatic shell. It removes up to 99.999% of impurities, including bacteria, viruses, fluoride, disinfectants, volatile organic contaminants, and hormones. Filter capacity up to 5,000 gallons. Stainless steel construction, easy assembly, low maintenance. Replacement filters are simple to install. And now, as part of an exclusive limited time introductory offer, you can save $20 off the retail price and get free shipping. This is a limited time offer, so order your unit today and receive free shipping and $20 off. Go to InfoWarsStore.com or call 888-253-3139.
And welcome back to our coverage of the New York primary. Jakari Jackson here with David Knight in studio. Now, we were laughing during the break about this video we just saw here. And the thing about this, David, I've been to many protests, as I know you have. Oftentimes, when you meet people, they're like the people you see in that video, the counter protesters. Yeah. Such as, like, we went to Planned Parenthood here in Austin. Yeah. And we were there. We were open to debate, but we didn't get people with debate. They came out there with signs physically covering people up like a big censor mark. Yeah. They yelled at your wife. Yeah. They tried to push an old man into the street. The guy was like yelling, and I got in his face because he was yelling at this old man. I was like, "You wanna do something?" He's like, "No, I'd rather yell at that guy over there." It's these young punks who, you know, have the nerve to spit in your face and then say you cannot defend yourself against me because, in his own words, he was a tranny.
They spit on our car. As my wife was leaving with my adopted daughter, they spit on our car at my daughter. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's the kind of people they are, and they don't want to debate. They want to. They don't even have their own signs.
They don't. They don't have any
intelligent up with a black sign to redact your protest sign.
And then when you give them the microphone, they just cuss at you. And they say, "You guys are racist." Well, I'm black. Well, you guys are sexist. Well, she's a woman. And they just spout these things out, hoping that you're going to melt away like the Wicked Witch. But when you stand firm and you actually have facts to back up your point of view, they don't know what to do with that.
Well, you know, why articulate your position on the issues when you can just gesticulate with a middle finger, right?
Yes.
You know, that's all that's about. Or just spit on somebody because you can't think of something to say. It's absolutely amazing. Again, we're looking at the results here, and it is right now with 21%. And for the Republican side, it's 63% for Trump, 23% for Kasich, 14% for Cruz. On the Democrat side, they have not called it yet for Hillary Clinton, even though she's ahead by 60.5 to Sanders 39.5. So it's going to be a big win for Clinton and Trump. They will get well more than 50% that they need. So they're going to get the bulk of the delegates. The way it works on the Republican side, Trump, as with getting more than 50%, will get 14 delegates. And then with that kind of majority statewide, he's probably going to win most, if not all, of the congressional districts. But of course, we've seen in South Carolina, where Donald Trump won every single congressional district, we now see Ted Cruz going in and taking his delegates. Which brings us to the 28 pages. I think it's very interesting as we see this picking up steam. We, of course, have been covering that specific small part of 9/11 for quite some time here at Infowars. We've had Congressman Walter Jones on many times to talk about that. And, of course, that's just one aspect of the fraud, of the lies involved in the official conspiracy theory. But it's very instructive, just as we're seeing with these elections and the stealing of these elections with somebody like Ted Cruz, who consistently loses unless he can play these Machiavellian games. I think it's interesting to take a look at where these people stand on the missing 28 pages. Let's start with Ted Cruz. He was asked by Sean Hannity last Friday in an interview. Hannity asked him, next question, the exit question, do you know what's in the 28 redacted pages of the 9/11 report? And Ted Cruz said, I have reviewed those pages. I believe they should be made public. Hannity said, can you give us some insight into what's in them? Cruz said, I can't without violating laws on classification, so I'm not allowed to do that without violating the law. And then the transcript says they're shouting and booing because people are not happy about that. And Hannity says, no, 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 no. I promised the senator that if he reveals it, I will bring him a cake with a file. Okay, well, let's talk about that a little bit, because there's an article from the Tampa Bay Times. And I want to tell you what a real statesman would do. A real statesman would not let them put a gag order on them. Here's Bob Graham. He's a guy who's a former governor of Florida, former senator from Florida. He was part of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He was part of the 9/11 Commission, and he has gone public. He's been kind of a central figure in saying these 28 pages ought to be made available to the public. He went on 60 Minutes to talk about this. Yes. Here's a story from last August on the Tampa Bay Times. And they talk about Graham, former legislator. He was in the Senate from 87 to 2005. He is absolutely convinced, says the Tampa Bay Times, absolutely convinced that the hijackers had outside help from Saudi Arabian officials. What Ted Cruz would not say, he will say. He says high-level law enforcement officials have told him to, quote, forget it. And then he told them, the Tampa Bay Times, former Senator Bob Graham said this. He told him about the day in 2011 when he and his wife, Adele, were heading to Washington, D.C. to spend Thanksgiving with one of their daughters. He says, as they stepped off the plane at Dulles Airport, 2 FBI agents approached him and asked the Grahams to accompany them to a nearby agency office. Graham had not informed the FBI he was traveling to the Washington area, and to this day, he does not know how they knew where he planned to spend Thanksgiving or on what airplane he would be aboard. Oh, gee, maybe they're watching.
Maybe they're watching you, Senator.
Yeah, maybe they're watching you, Senator. Maybe you shouldn't have signed that Patriot Act.
Yeah, just like Feinstein. She was all for people being spied on until it actually came to her. She's like, you guys are spying on me too?
Yeah,
like, yes.
So it kind of creeped him out. But then it gets better, Jakari. He says they take him to a nearby office where Sean Joyce, deputy director, the number 2 guy at the FBI, was waiting for him. And so the number 2 guy in the FBI had traveled from the District of Columbia to meet him. Graham said he didn't feel threatened by the sudden attention from the FBI agents because he thought the agency was finally going to release information that he had been requesting them to release for months. There you go. See, he even thinks, oh, they're going to do the right thing. They've been reading my mail. They're going to release this information. No, they are going to browbeat him and pressure him to shut up. That's what this meeting was about. They go on with this. They say when he got to the FBI office at Dulles, his wife, Mrs. Graham, was placed in a room by herself while Graham was ushered in to see Sean Joyce. After some period of time, Mrs. Graham knocked on the door of her cell-like room and asked for something to read, so the FBI gave her an FBI training manual, noting that was the only thing they had lying around. No copies of the Constitution. No pocket Constitution.
Yeah, I'm sure they don't. Those things are probably illegal.
Yeah, here's a little bit of the NDAA for you thrown in here, okay? Indefinite detention without charges. No, but they sequester her in a room while they browbeat her husband, former senator who's on the 9/11 Commission.
She probably should have read it to them so they could have learned what the rules were.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Maybe they haven't read those rules. So meanwhile, Sean Joyce was telling Graham that the FBI had done a thorough job investigating all the events in Sarasota, concluded there was no communication between the Saudi family that fled and the 9/11 hijackers who flew airplanes in the World Trade Center. Forgive Graham for doubting the FBI, says the Tampa Bay Times, but he had just seen some FBI reports and a Florida Bulldog, that's a publication, a Florida Bulldog story about the investigation of that Sarasota family. It included interviews with guards at the gated subdivision where the Saudi family lived and an allegation that cars linked to Mohammed Atta and other Saudi pilots, quote unquote, I'll put that in quotes, who trained in Florida had been frequent visitors to the Saudi-owned house south of Sarasota. Okay, Graham had reason to be suspicious. He was former chairman of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee when the 9/11 attacks occurred, et cetera. He was co-chair of the Congressional Commission that investigated the attacks, okay? Now, Graham said he told Joyce on that November day that he had seen 2 reports indicating ties between the family and the hijackers needed more investigation. He said Joyce told him that the reports were based on information that had been taken out of context by an FBI agent. So they throw their own FBI agent under the bus, and he says, no, it's out of context. Graham said, well, I'd like to see that context. So then Joyce scheduled a meeting in a few days on December 7th, scheduled a meeting with him in Washington and said, I'll have an agent show up and give you the context. Well, Graham paid himself to travel on his own nickel. He paid to return to Washington on December 7th to talk to this FBI agent. and he was told by Joyce that no, Agent Sheffield is not going to be allowed to talk to you. Okay, and Agent Sheffield, that was supposed to talk to him, left the FBI after 20 years. Okay, he is still not returning phone calls. Sean Joyce, the number 2 guy, retired from the FBI shortly after that, went to work for PricewaterhouseCoopers, which does a lot of work for multinational corporations, including the CIA, the company. Okay, so when they talk about, when Ted Cruz says, oh, you know, I can't talk about that. I've actually read it, but I can't talk about it. They'd put me in jail. Well, you know what? We've got some senators who are angry enough about the injustice that they will talk about it. The families are out there wanting justice done. The families want to know what's behind this. And there's a bill out there supported by people like Chucky Schumer as well as John Cornyn, people on the opposite sides of things. And yet the people at the very top, like Paul Ryan, people like Lindsey Graham, tells the people, hey, shut up. You don't get a lawyer.
You're an enemy combatant, basically.
Well, you're not even an enemy combatant. You're a family member of somebody who was a victim of a terrorist attack.
Yes.
So the victims' families can shut up because they don't get a lawyer either, because that's the way it works, folks. When you shut down due process, when you have a criminal, dishonest government, they're going to shut it down at every level. And so now we see Lindsey Graham out there blocking this. We see the others doing it. And there was an article last June when Rand Paul was trying to get the 9/11 pages declassified. And at that time, last June, Ted Cruz was not supporting him in that effort. Okay, not supporting. But now, of course, all that.
Yeah, he's all into it. And now we're pretty much at the mercy of our president. It's come out in the news, I believe it's on Fox News, as a matter of fact, talking about how, I believe it was Senator Graham or former Senator Graham approached the White House, and they said they would have a response for him within the next 60 days or so.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, we already know what that response is going to be. That response is going to be, no, 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 I'm going to be going to see the Saudis. I'm going to be bowing to them again, because remember, we have all those pictures of Obama bowing to the Saudis. Okay, he's going to go back, and he's going to kowtow, literally, to the Saudis. He's not going to release this. We got the Saudis essentially admitting it, blackmailing us, trying to, with saying they're going to pull $750 billion out. So it'd be like, it'd be like, we need to bail out the truth is really what we need to do. Okay, we've done that before. We had an $800 billion TARP bill or more, and we bailed out the crooked, lying banks. So let's bail out the truth, the 9/11.
I think it is encouraging, David, to see that even though it's taken so long, they are talking about this stuff on 60 Minutes.
Yes.
You know, so it's been a long time coming, but it's to the point where it's not a conspiracy theory. It's on CBS now, folks, so you can believe it now.
That's true. That's true.
You can listen to what they say in those reports, and then people will start to ask the questions, well, maybe there is something to these guys, to these hijackers, and possible Saudi connections.
Well, we know where Donald Trump stands on this. Donald Trump said, hey, let's release these pages. Remember back in the debate, he said, release these pages. We're going to find out it wasn't the Iraqis, it was the Saudis behind all this, because we all know what's in this, essentially. We don't know all of the details, but still, even though we know that the Saudis were involved in this, and the Saudis admit it, saying they're going to blackmail people, we should still have this released. Let's look at one of the other candidates. And of course, when Donald Trump said, let's release this, National Review said he sounded like an Alex Jones caller. He's a total 9/11 truther, because he wants to release what Bob Graham, who is a Democrat, Bob Kerry, who was a former senator who was a Democrat. We got Leahy, who was Secretary of the Navy for the Reagan administration. We got all these people who were on the 9/11 Commission, said there's absolutely no reason this should be classified. It's classified to protect the Saudis. And here's the deal.
And real quick before you get to that, also remember Richard Reeves confronted Jeb Bush.
Yeah.
He said, hey, Jeb, you want to release those pages? Like, sure, you got them?
Yeah, you got
them. Yeah, I carry them around in my back pocket, Jeb.
Sarcastically. Well, what did Kasich say about this? Well, Kasich was confronted again last August, and they asked him about the 28 pages. And he says, well, they said Bob Graham wants to have these declassified. Again, this was in Florida where he was encountered. And he says, well, I don't know what Bob Graham is saying. He might also say, I don't care. I don't know or care what Bob Graham is saying. He says he can have his opinion. Okay, he can have, and it's the same opinion as the other 9/11 commissioners. But let me tell you my view on Saudi Arabia. I think we've coddled Saudi Arabia for too long. I'm going to get tough with them. I think when they support things like madrasas and so forth, look, it's far worse than that. Okay, there are front men with Al-Qaeda. Okay, there are front men in Syria with the moderate rebels, the ISIS people, al-Nusra, the people who became ISIS. But then he goes on to say, that doesn't mean that we overthrow our relationship with Saudi Arabia. This is John Kasich talking. Because they share more things with us than they don't. In other words, they share like 750 billion things with us, don't they?
Yeah, that's right.
It's called the petrodollar. Okay, real quickly, where are the Democrats? Bernie Sanders says he hasn't read it, and he's not intending to read it, but he'd like for you to read it. He doesn't want to be bothered. He doesn't want to have that on his conscience.
Oh, I'd love to read it.
Yeah, yeah. So he'll let you read it. He thinks maybe you ought to read it, but he hasn't read it. And, you know, quite frankly, I don't think he's read the TPP either, these other secret agreements. Hillary Clinton refused to answer. Essentially, she says, I'm not going to comment. Won't even tell us if she's read it or not. And continues to say, well, I think we need to be very concerned with national security. Is that not irony?
Concerned enough to read a document like 28 pages.
Yeah, well, you know, national security, the lady who put all the secure documents on her server, and then goes on to say, well, hey, if there's nothing there, then fine. Nobody's held accountable, because that's the way this is going to. In other words, hey, it's about national security, but the Saudis aren't going to be held accountable any more than I'm going to be held accountable, says Hillary Clinton.
Absolutely. And real quick, I think they have called it for Mrs. Clinton with 60%.
Yep, I see.
Looking here at CNN, and also 62%. For Trump, Kasich at 23, and Cruz at 14.
We're going to call it in just a moment here for the Infowars live nightly news live edition here. Now that they've called the election, before we do, real quickly, I know you follow guns very closely, Jakari. And one of the things that I thought was interesting on the Democrat side, as they bantered back and forth about this, Hillary Clinton, who doesn't want to hold the Saudis responsible for 9/11, wants to hold gun manufacturers responsible for what happened in Sandy Hook. And, of course, there's a Connecticut judge that came out and said, we're going to allow the families of 9/11 to sue, or Sandy Hook, we're going to allow them to sue
Remington, Bushmaster.
Exactly. And she's all for that. And she was haranguing Bernie Sanders because he had voted for a law, which is in the Congress, which says if gun manufacturers, firearms manufacturers, or ammunition manufacturers make something and they make it the way that it's supposed to work, and somebody goes out and commits a crime with it, you're not going to hold them responsible for the crime. I mean, that's a fundamental tenet of the justice system. That shouldn't even have to have been put in there, but they put it in there because of people like Hillary Clinton, because of people like Michael Bloomberg, and yet that's not good enough for Hillary Clinton. So she was blaming Bernie Sanders, who voted to uphold the rule of law, says you're not going to hold somebody responsible or liable for something if they haven't done anything wrong. She was blaming him for the deaths of Sandy Hook.
Which I don't understand this mentality, David, because we often have this conversation about guns, but the basic thing we always talk about, what about vehicles, a motor vehicle?
Yeah.
It happened right here in the city of Austin, Texas, South by Southwest. I attended the press conference the next day myself. A guy drives on the sidewalk, hits numerous people, I think 20 or so people, 2 or 3 of them die. We just had a couple months ago the woman in Las Vegas.
So they should have been able to sue Ford.
Yeah, so the woman in Las Vegas drives on the curb, hits many people as well, but nobody sued Ford or Chevy or Mazda or whatever she is driving, because people have the common sense in that situation to understand this isn't the vehicle's fault. The vehicle didn't drive itself. Now, we do have self-driving cars. That's another issue. But in this case, these crazy people decided to drive on the sidewalk maliciously, intentionally, and harm people, and they held those people responsible, not the vehicles that they were driving. A similar thing should happen in Sandy Hook. Nobody at Bushmaster or Remington made the gun that purposely, shot children or anything to that nature. Yes, the gun was fully functional, but it wasn't made for that intended use to murder children. It was made for a responsible gun owner to defend their families or hunt or whatever they wanted to do, not for that purpose that was used in Sandy Hook.
And it's absolutely amazing that Hillary Clinton, who will not take any responsibility for releasing classified documents above top secret because they were on her unsecured personal server so she could keep her own personal secrets there. She won't accept any responsibility for that, but she wants to hold people who don't have any responsibility for these other events responsible.
And then they shift the blame when we talk about responsibility. You talk about responsibility for Benghazi.
Yeah.
We saw the document came out just the other day. I believe Steve Watson put it out on our site, documenting how she admitted just the day or so after the Benghazi attack, she was talking to the Egyptian prime minister, admitting that the stupid movie, whatever it's called, The Innocence of Muslims, had nothing to do with the attack. And then she goes on national TV, goes to these press conferences, and said it's because of a movie.
Yeah. That's what we're going to be faced with on the Democrat side. Again, if you were to use a gun and a car to rob a bank, you rob them with the gun and then escape in the car,
Yes.
she would have them be able to sue the gun manufacturer, but not the car manufacturer.
Yeah.
That's okay. And so she criticizes Bernie Sanders for this, but Bernie Sanders, unfortunately, was really not much better. You know, she had thrown the entire state of Vermont under the bus, saying, well, all these guns are coming from Vermont that we're finding in New York and in Connecticut with Sandy Hook, okay? We're finding all these guns coming in from Vermont, and it's Vermont's problem. And the governor of Vermont says, well, hey, I support Hillary Clinton. I'm a superdelegate for Hillary Clinton. But she's wrong to blame our state for that. But she went ahead and blamed Bernie Sanders, and Bernie Sanders caved on this, illustrating why he's consistently gotten a D- to an F rating from the NRA.
Yes.
He comes in and says, hey, if they're selling a lot of guns or a lot of ammunition to somebody, then they have responsibility at that store. That's like saying if somebody goes out and buys several cars for their taxi company or their truck company, and then they run over somebody because of it. Now Ford does have liability. I mean, that's the insanity.
And very quickly, David, just so you think about to the story of Elliot Rodger a few years ago, a guy who used a car, a knife, and a firearm to go out and murder people. But the next day, the only people who wanted to vote ban things wanted to ban the firearm.
That's right. There we go. That's the insanity that we're up against. Also, the insanity of these rigged elections. We'll know tomorrow what the delegate count is going to be as they sort this out. And I'm sure we can trust them to get the right answers. For Infowars Nightly News, I'm David Knight with Jakari Jackson. Thanks for joining us. Join us again tomorrow night at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
A lot of people ask me, what is the most important area of Infowars that runs the whole operation that is having such a big effect against the globalists? And I've said it over and over again, it is you, the listeners and the viewers, that send us the intel, the news tips, that support the broadcast, that spread the word. You are 90% of the operation or more. You don't stand beside us, you stand at the heart of Infowars. When I talk about the people at Infowars, from customer service, the shipping department, being just as important as our anchors, our researchers, our investigative journalists, and myself, it's absolutely true. Without this team that we've built over the last 20 plus years, we wouldn't be able to do any of what we've been doing. And that's what's so exciting, because we finally built up to a point where we now have the launch pad. Introducing AutoShip for InfoWarsLife.com, a new way to save time and money when you stock up on InfoWarsStore.com products. Again, ladies and gentlemen, when products are sold out, you're unable to get them, sometimes for months, but we hold back the products for people that have already signed up for AutoShip. When you choose AutoShip before checkout on your order at InfoWarsStore.com, we'll give you 10% off and give you guaranteed delivery of out-of-stock products that are on your AutoShip list. Plus, we're giving you free shipping on all orders above $50. Listeners have been requesting this for years because it's so easy to forget to reorder the products when you need them each month. Now it's finally here. AutoShip at InfoWarsStore.com and InfoWarsLife.com. It's easy. Go to InfoWarsStore.com, select your favorite product, click on the AutoShip, and choose how often you want us to send you another order. As you know, I coined the term 360 win, and with the new AutoShip feature at InfoWarsLife.com, it's a sure win. You add to that free shipping on orders of $50, it is a can't lose. Visit InfoWarsStore.com and save 10% off on your next InfoWars Life order by selecting AutoShip at checkout, and get free shipping on all orders above $50. That's InfoWarsStore.com, or call toll-free 888-253-3139.